G'day again guys, and thank you for joining me. So if you've been watching my channel for any amount of time, you may have noticed that I really love trying out new art supplies. And today I'm going to be trying out probably the most expensive paper I have used so far, which is the Clairefontaine Pastell Mat. Now, recently I've seen some really beautiful colour pencil pieces done on this surface. The Pastell Mat just seems to give the artworks this really gorgeous blend of detail and a certain softness that I really admire, and I had to give it a try for myself. Well, unfortunately, it wasn't just a matter of a quick trip to the art shop this time. The Pastell Mat just isn't really readily available here in Australia, and when you do find it, oh boy, it's not cheap. I only found one retailer here in Australia, which was from softpastels.com, and I'll leave a link down to that in the description. Although I have since found a few listings on Amazon that are kind of competitively priced, and I'll leave some links to those down below too. I only placed a small order, getting a half sheet of the light blue and the light grey, and I'm working on the light blue sheet today. Now, I didn't know what to expect from this surface. I did know that it had a texture to it, similar to the sanded papers that I've really enjoyed using in the past, but different. Unlike sanded papers, the Pastell Mat is coated with a superfine coat of cellulose fibres, which the Clairefontaine website says is coarser than a velour surface, but softer than a sanded one. That doesn't really mean much until you actually start working on it. So the only way I was going to find out how this paper worked was to start working. I chose a familiar subject and just got to it. Well, it didn't take long for me to start to understand what all the fuss was about. The paper feels almost like a fabric to the touch, but it grabs the pencil just as effectively as much coarser sanded paper. That fine texture meant that I was able to keep some very nice crisp details, although it was still toothy enough for me to layer my light colours over my darks. I did some experiments on my test strip, and I discovered that my polychromos were the better pencils for this paper. While the Prismas and the luminants certainly worked, the softer pencils seemed to fill up the tooth a little bit too quick, and they started to blend together instead of allowing me to layer those colours over the top of each other. Now, this quick blending may be advantageous to some other artists, I'm not sure, but it definitely wasn't the effect that I was looking for. I got to about this part of the drawing without using any thinners, and I actually think it was going really well without it, but I kind of just wanted to see what would happen. I had found that using thinners on other sanded papers could be, well, really challenging. Trying to get the balance between the amount of thinners I should use was really tricky. But it just wasn't the same on this Pastell Mat. This surface drank up some of those thinners in exactly the same way as my usual watercolour paper would, meaning that I didn't get stuck with those uncontrollable puddles of dissolved pencil. This was a very pleasant surprise, really making this surface the perfect bridge between my usual Arches hot press paper and any of the sanded surfaces that I have used so far. I worked down the piece using my nougats and my browns to add some shading to the darker areas, and adding my ivory and whites over the top. As I started working down on the brown wing feathers, I came across my first problem. I started to notice, I want to call it a crack, but it's not. It's more like a fault in the surface, which ran down the entire length of the page. I had not noticed it until this point, but as I started to add colour, it became more and more obvious. Now, I could see other areas on the page where the coating wasn't completely consistent, but that didn't really matter because it covered up very easily. But this particular fault was almost like two parallel lines that were becoming very, very obvious, and I started to worry. You might be able to see it here in this still shot. This was about as close as I was able to focus. Unfortunately, there wasn't much more I could do at this point, so I just kept covering the area with more and more pencil to hopefully fill in the fault. And for the most part, that worked pretty well. I can still see it there, but I do feel like that's only because I know it's there, and the casual observer probably would never notice. Unless I told you, which I just told you. Look, there's a fault. I was pretty happy with my patch up, however it really knocked the wind out of my sails, and I knew I would always be just that little bit disappointed in the piece. But damn it, I paid $8 for this piece of paper, and I was going to finish this piece. So I kept on working on the wing and the tail feathers, really enjoying being able to add those lighter details on top of such a dark brown base, and having a chance to add that pop of terracotta orange and sky blue to what was otherwise a fairly neutral coloured bird. Finally, I moved on to the branch that this kookaburra is sitting on. Now, at this point, I was pretty comfortable with being able to get some nice feather textures on this surface. But the reference photo, which I got from wildlifereferencephotos.com by the way, showed this bird sitting on a very smooth barked branch. And I wasn't sure if I was going to have any trouble getting that smooth blend of colours down onto this surface. Well, I shouldn't have worried because I found it to be exceptionally easy. I just held my pencil lightly to the side and built up a decent amount of pencil on the page. I then took some thinners and blended it out to an incredibly smooth texture. I then went a little bit further by rubbing the branch with my fingertip while it was still a little bit damp with the thinners, which I am sure is definitely not recommended health and safety wise, but it was very, very effective. With the branch complete, I was ready to call this one done. So here's the final piece. I really enjoyed working on this surface. All in all, this piece only took me about 3 hours to complete, which is insanely fast for colour pencils. And I'm finding myself very curious on how this is going to work with my soft pastels. While I don't think the Pastelmat is going to replace my Arches Hot Press as my go-to colour pencil paper, I'm sure I will be using it again. I would just like to take a moment to thank my patrons. I will have a real-time video of this piece available to you guys up very soon. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please leave me a like or a comment to tell me what you think, and if you'd like to see some more of my work, why not hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, guys.